Now that should cure the problem. Give me a thumbs up in the chat room again, if you would please. Sound check, everybody's saying. I had the wrong button selected. All right, there we go. Thank you guys. I always rely on the chat room. So just real quickly, I'll recap what I just said. It was just kind of a technical note. We broadcast for new patrons this message, and for those that are watching on YouTube after this broadcast is produced live, we produce our live streams on Sundays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. And I send out a link approximately 30 minutes prior to, so around 6:30 Eastern Time, give or take. And that link is sent out through Patreon only. And as you know, as a patron, you then receive an email that indicates that the live stream is starting, and it includes the link. Now, for new patrons, you may on occasion experience the sending of that email to your spam folder. So what I'm saying is, if you don't get the link by 7 p.m. Eastern Time, jump over to your spam folder and you'll probably find it in there. It just depends on how your email system filters those messages coming from Patreon. But you can always let me know if you're having issues with that, and I'll put you on the short list that I have that I personally send the link to by personal email before the live stream begins. Please don't wait until 6:30 Eastern Time to let me know that you have not received the link, or 5 minutes before airtime, because usually I'm not looking at my emails during the half hour that precedes going on the air at 7 p.m. Eastern. Okay, so just a little programming note, because we're always getting new patrons and we are very thankful for that. And I want to make sure that everybody's comfortable with how to access the live stream and also how to access chat. Again, a programming note, chat drops away on YouTube when I make these live streams public on YouTube, which is after the air date. And so it may be frustrating that you don't see the chat room on YouTube when you are looking at it in the public version, okay? Anyway, this evening is a continuation of what we started yesterday evening, and we were talking about hydrogels specific to microneedle arrays that are embedded in what I'm calling the vaccine patch, okay? This vaccine patch, my wife and I, Kathleen, have come to the conclusion that, in combination with looking at the scientific papers and published journals and patents, and in conjunction with, of course, praying on this, to receive that confirmation through the Holy Spirit, whether we're on the right track with our conclusions regarding the vaccine patch, which is on the horizon of being deployed worldwide. And in conjunction with everything that's been going on with the COVID-19, with quarantine, with the economic impact of it, of all of the issues that are going on today that we are all well aware of in the world, we have a coalescing of issues, events, and technology, and in the spiritual realm, a coalescing of spiritual forces, both satanic and from God himself, that spiritual force and spiritual energy that is coming together in these times, in these days. And we know from reading scripture, and we know from examining prophecy, that we're in the last days. And so this coalescence of events and prophetic events that are foretold in the Bible, including in Revelation, we bring all of that to bear on whether or not this coming vaccine that will be delivered by a patch that is applied to the hand, it does not indicate being applied to the forehead, but at least to the back of the hand or the forearm, will be the delivery vehicle for this coming vaccine for COVID-19. And as such, we're calling it the vaccine tattoo, because within the microneedles are delivered not only the vaccine, but the record, literally the record of the vaccination having taken place by way of quantum dots. So by saying all of that, that is by way of a quick review of what we've covered over the last few weeks. Okay, I'm going to turn the volume up just a little bit. I have the volume turned down because on the last few live streams, we've had some feedback noise that was coming through, so I'm turning up my microphone just a little bit more. Okay, but I'm trying to avoid the feedback that we've had in the last few live streams. Yesterday was better because I did turn the microphone down, so I apologize for the difficulties. But again, the delivery of a vaccine record in combination with the vaccine itself, and as I said, all of the coalescing of events that are unfolding, it does appear that this is going to be the vehicle that is utilized, this patch is utilized for the application, the introduction into the body, literally, the mark of the beast. We've covered this in my monthly Entangled magazine in detail, including the papers and the journals and the patents, in an in-depth but still an introductory level so that it's manageable information. We've presented this information beyond what we've covered in the live streams. Yesterday we were talking about hydrogels that are utilized in either producing the microneedles themselves or acting as a transport medium that is injected through the microneedles to carry a vaccine into the body. Foundational material has been in the April 1st edition of Entangled magazine. The continuation of yesterday's discussion about hydrogels and the microneedle arrays is what I left off with yesterday evening, was the fact that these microneedle arrays can be used as a biosensor. And so tonight we are talking about Wi-Fi biosensors. And again, this is all based on literature, and I've shared prior to yesterday's live stream quite a few links, more specific to hydrogels. Shared a few links before tonight's live stream that are more specific to the microneedle array patch being utilized as a transmitter, as a receiver and sender of information, as a biosensor. And this isn't new information. You'll see by looking at today's links that this has been in development since 2008. This idea of using microneedle arrays as a biosensor. So the short version, and we'll get into the papers, we'll get into the links this evening, the short version is this. The microneedle array provides the mechanism for the introduction of pharmaceuticals for treating cancer, for diagnostic purposes, for the purpose of monitoring blood glucose levels and other medications, other levels of other therapeutics that are introduced into the body rather than using a hypodermic needle. This is basically a painless way of introducing this through the skin, just to the subcutaneous layer of the skin, without having to obtain venous access. In other words, inserting into a vein a hypodermic needle or even a deeper intramuscular injection, much like you would find when you get a flu shot and they inject you in your shoulder. It will be a shallow tissue injection or with a longer needle because of what they're trying to accomplish with a therapeutic or with a vaccine. They want to go deeper into the muscle tissue so that there's more rapid uptake, more rapid absorption of a medication. They go deeper with an IM, intramuscular injection. What we're talking about here is just on the surface, okay, just through the first couple of layers of the skin itself, down into the subcutaneous level. very shallow and therefore relatively painless. The interesting thing about most microneedle arrays today is that they dissolve. They're not so much a time release because they're delivering through the hollow core of the needle whatever medication or vaccine that is necessary to be delivered. But then over a short period of time, the needles themselves harmlessly, because they're composed of polymers and sugars, they will dissolve into the body, and there's no immune system response, no reaction, no negative reaction to the dissolving of those needles. So very effective, and then the patch, of course, is peeled off, just like a Band-Aid. Okay? And it really doesn't have that much adhesive to it that it's even as strongly bound as your typical Band-Aid, your adhesive Band-Aid. So with that basic information, that basic understanding, what we're adding to tonight is the fact that, as I've said in the last 3 live streams, these microneedle arrays, specific ones that are designed to provide wireless information transmission, function. They are an antenna that can be interrogated by a Wi-Fi system. Now, as I've said in the last few live streams, I'm avoiding using the number or the letter of that Wi-Fi system that we're all well aware of and we're talking about these days. My purpose in doing that is to avoid having my channel taken down by YouTube. Okay, they're very sensitive about discussions of that Wi-Fi system in the same sentence as vaccines. And I think you guys all appreciate that already. So we're talking about an interrogation. In other words, the transmission of a signal, Wi-Fi broadcast signal, that is received by, more so than the microneedles that have dissolved, but more so by the quantum dots that have been delivered into the skin. And those quantum dots, as I said, they function on one hand as a record keeping, a record of the vaccine having been delivered, or if it was some other pharmaceutical agent. Doesn't have to be strictly a vaccine. And so that record is permanent. Those quantum dots, which can be composed of copper, they can be composed of nanodiamonds, of carbon nanodiamonds, or a host of other metals. And essentially, they're in such minute quantities, they're really not bioreactive. They're inert. And the immune system doesn't react to their presence in the skin. So those quantum dots, they, like any other crystal, they have a specific frequency and wavelength of light that when they receive a Wi-Fi signal, they will vibrate, they will oscillate at specific frequencies and wavelengths. These are known as fluorescing, that's fluorescent, glowing if you will, fluorescing quantum dots. Now, for the most part, these are not visible. They're not fluorescing within the visible light spectrum for the naked eye. However, when a near-infrared or a laser is used to scan those quantum dots, it will reveal that specific color of wavelength that individual nanodiamond, in this case nanodiamond quantum dot, is oscillating at. And each individual quantum dot has its own individual color, which is produced by its own specific wavelength and frequency due to its oscillation. And that's how you're able to have a record that is unique and specific to each individual. These are customized. These are actually patterns that are randomly produced. We've spent an awful lot of time talking about random number generation in many of our live streams. Think back to things like random number generation in geomancy, where we look at the historical dark arts origin to modern day computing, all the way up to quantum computers today that function as, at least at this point in technology, the ultimate in random number generating systems. So it is not difficult with today's technology to provide a unique pattern of quantum dots within a single application of a microneedle array patch. This leads us to the mark of the beast, a mark that is unique to each individual person with today's technology. So that's a long opening monologue. I want to go to today's scripture. The question came up in the chat room earlier. We're starting at the beginning? Question mark. And I said, yes. You begin at the beginning when you've reached the end. And we're at the end of days. So let's go back to the beginning to see how things began. I think it's appropriate. So yesterday we started with Genesis 1. Today we are going to Genesis 2. And as soon as my software will respond, it will bring that up on the screen. It's always a little slow getting back to that first screen. And I will begin with the scripture while it's trying to catch up. If I can get it to open. There it is. Okay, Genesis 2, verses 1, 2, and 3. Thus the heavens and the earth were completed in all their vast array. By the seventh day, God had finished the work he had been doing. So on the seventh day, he rested from all his work. Then God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it he rested from all the work of creating that he had done. As I said yesterday, and of course this is wrapping up Genesis 1, where God created over the course of 6 days the heavens and the earth and man and woman. And the reason that I bring it up again today is that the hubris of man in thinking that he can modify human DNA, that he can modify God's creation. We were created in his image. And as my wife has often said, we are fearfully and wonderfully made. And that should put the fear of God in Satan. If he wasn't so full of himself, if he wasn't such a liar and a deceiver. You see, there's no truth in Satan. There's no ability to think truthfully, to perceive God's creation truthfully, and therefore he has upended God's creation, or at least that's what he's trying to do. And we can see that clearly as Christians with the Holy Spirit and the discernment therefore provided to us, and the understanding when we're reading the scriptures and the new meanings we get every time we read even familiar scriptures like we always do here. They take on new meaning and new context each day. So it's important for us to understand why these things in technology are happening. They are happening to usher in that one world order, of course, but to usher in the Antichrist himself, the first beast and the second beast, to usher in the false prophet, to usher in this world of evil, giving Satan, so to speak, his last hurrah. He has but a short time. He knows that. And so he's accelerating the deployment of these technologies, accelerating the deployment of his infrastructure in preparation for his Antichrist to appear on the scene. Again, a coalescing of all the things that we observe and we are fully aware of are all coming together. And we can see that the Antichrist is just on the horizon in terms of being revealed to the world. Okay? None of this should cause us fear or trepidation. It causes us concern for those that are not saved, concerned especially for our loved ones that are not saved. But for us individually, it should not cause us fear. Even with the quarantine and the COVID-19 and the economic collapse and all of these things that are going on. We put our trust and our faith in He who created us. He's not going to allow us to be destroyed by the agendas of Satan himself. Okay? Alrighty. My wife is in the chat room. I don't think she's going to join us here in the studio, so to speak, but we'll see how things progress here.
I have questions when you're ready.
Well, I wasn't going to take any questions right at this point.
Okay, well, we can do it later.
But I'm open to it. I don't want to lose the continuity of what we're doing here, but
okay,
go ahead.
Go ahead with what you're doing, and we'll ask at the end.
Well, if it's specific to something that I just said.
No.
Okay, well, let's stay on track. I'd like to open with something that I sent separately to all of you patrons. And that is a message that is entitled Patent, Crypto Body Movements. If you'd open up that PDF, which is a PDF of a patent, the title of this patent is Cryptocurrency System Using Body Activity Data. This builds upon all of the background information that we've provided in the past about cryptocurrencies and the blockchain. I mentioned just a moment ago the infrastructure, the technological infrastructure that is being rolled out, the infrastructure of the B system, and I've identified blockchain as that infrastructure, and the building out of that blockchain infrastructure system has been carried forth by appealing to man's basic nature of greed in the form of cryptocurrencies. That was the only purpose of the cryptocurrencies, was to build the blockchain system. The mark of the beast ties everyone who takes that mark to the blockchain system. Now I'm just going to step a little bit away from this patent before we get into reading the abstract, and I won't go too deep into this. Those of you that have seen I Pet Goat 2, you may recall, and I don't have it right in front of me because I'm just recalling this myself, but there's a scene where there's a goat in a box, and he sticks his head out through the opening in the box, and he is penned in behind barbed wire, obviously in a concentration camp. And there are a series of blocks that filter down from above him and gather around his neck like a necklace of blocks, multicolored blocks. Those blocks are the blockchain. It's the necklace chain and the blocks on that chain. So go back and review that, because it's very timely for what is going on right now. And just before that necklace of the blockchain falls into place around his neck, you'll see that his head actually is portrayed as three heads. You'll see his head revolving around counterclockwise as three individual heads that then come to rest as a single head. And where before his eyes were brightly focused and sharp, once that counterclockwise movement of three heads stops as a singular head, his eyes are now very sleepy and droopy, and you'll see in his eyes a spiraling effect reminiscent of being hypnotized. And then the blockchain comes together. This all, I think, in my interpretation of I Pet Goat 2 in this particular scene, illustrates what I've said since 2013 about the after effects, the immediate after effects of taking the mark of the beast. that the DNA of the person is changed in the form of a third strand of DNA by way of that injection of a vaccine. And that when their DNA is changed, their mind is changed to the extent that when they are connected to the blockchain system, they are no longer even aware that they have undergone any sort of change at all. And I think iPetGoat shows this, that there's 3 heads, which are the third strand of DNA. There's this hypnotic effect where the person appears to have been hypnotized and is now in a sleepy, semi-conscious state. And they're connected to the blockchain around the neck, which has also been described as the hive mind. The mark of the beast connects a person's mind to the blockchain system, the hive mind. And we've spent a lot of time talking about Elon Musk and his neural link and neural lace systems and all of this, transhumanist agenda of connecting our human minds to computers, to the AI system. These are all the things coming together. So I'd like to add to this discussion of blockchain by talking about this patent, cryptocurrency system using body activity data. And in the patent, you'll see in the first figure, it has a communication network, which is a cloud system. It has the server network of that communication network and the cryptocurrency system, which is, of course, blockchain. And then you have a user device and a sensor and an individual person. So this is a person wearing a sensor, which is the microneedle array with the quantum dots that has delivered the vaccine and has a record of the vaccination. That's the user device. Think about those Fitbit devices that people wear around their wrist. Okay? This is a user device, this microneedle array patch. It's a sensor. It's a biosensor. And through Wi-Fi, it connects to the cloud, plain and simple. And it's interrogated. In other words, through Wi-Fi, that mark of the beast receives a signal. And that signal is scanning those quantum dots, interpreting the pattern of those dots that are unique to you, and then retransmitting back to the cloud through Wi-Fi the full process of interrogation of a biosensor is sending a signal and receiving back information. Abstract. The human body activity associated with a task provided to a user may be used in a mining process of a cryptocurrency system. A server may provide a task to a device of a user which is communicatively coupled to the server. A sensor in this communicative coupling system, or is comprised in the device of the user, may sense body activity of the user. Body activity data may be generated based on the sensed body activity of the user. The cryptocurrency system is coupled to the device of the user and may verify if the body activity data satisfies one or more conditions set by the cryptocurrency system, and award cryptocurrency to the user whose body activity is verified. Now, there's plenty of technical things in here that you can appreciate that in a patent, but I'll just unpack the abstract. This is a system in which a person will perform a physical task, what is known in cryptocurrency mining as proof of work, POW. Isn't that interesting? Proof of work. Once a task has been performed, once the work has been accomplished. A cryptocurrency is awarded to that person who performed the task. Now, most of you understand that in cryptocurrency mining, the proof of work involves specifically designed computers that are functioning solely for the purpose of solving an encrypted problem. Once they decrypt the problem, they present the solution, the computer is doing this, presents the solution into the blockchain. There is a system of verification within the blockchain that examines that answer, and if the answer is acceptable, if it is verified, then that is considered to be proof that some work process took place by which the owner of that computer system is then awarded a crypto coin. Now, instead of the computer doing the work, a human is doing some form of physical task. And a body sensor connected to that person is connected to the blockchain system through the cloud, through the Wi-Fi system, this interrogation system. And if the human performs the task that is specified by the mining process, by the blockchain system, if you will, then that human will receive a reward for physically performing some sort of function. And then they're paid for that function. What I just have laid out for you, and I'm sure you're way ahead of me already, I have said for years now, even back to 2013 in my very first public presentation, that what the ruling class, the elite if you have to, want to do with humanity are two things. We of course have discussed, and we know there's a depopulation agenda well underway, and it's accelerating. But aside from depopulation, those that are left, those that are not killed off, what's their function? How do they fit into society? Well, what I have said for many years now, 7 years now, isn't that interesting? 7 years, is that they want to create a feudal system. This is the dictator, this is the Antichrist. Feudal system, acting as a king. And in the feudal system, you have the elite, and then you have the serf class, the slave class, SERF, the serf class of humanity. Well, I've just laid out for you from this patent how they're going to accomplish that. You have the serf class performing tasks. They all have the mark. They're tied into, through Wi-Fi, into the blockchain system, which is rewarding them with a cryptocurrency. And as you well know, that cryptocurrency we have identified as the Libra cryptocurrency. It will be following the debt reset, which follows the worldwide economic collapse. The debt reset brings in the new global currency of Libra, and that will be the cryptocurrency that a person would receive payment through that blockchain system by way of being tied in with a microneedle array of quantum dots that have been inserted in this vaccination process. Now, you won't hear Bill Gates of hell lay out what I've just laid out for you. But you guys are good researchers. I know that because of all of the great information that you send to me. You know how to discover this as easily as I do. And you're able to interpret these as I'm doing for you. I'm just a researcher and reporter for you. I'm reporting to you the facts. I'm reading from the patents. And because you're at that level of independent thinking and critical thinking, you're able to put all these pieces together as well. But these are pieces that will not be made known to the public because the public's not looking for this information. They're not thinking independently. They are not thinking critically. I commend you for being in that class of thinkers, apart from the herd. And you know that you're not going to take the mark of the beast. And you know that you are not going to be part of this serf class of humanity. But you have the patent in front of you right now. And if this is later on a public broadcast and there are people listening to this that are not patrons, if you want that patent, you can search it out for yourself. But it's easier found if you join us on Patreon. Okay? It's just an example of what we do here all the time. Okay? So this patent is it's rather shocking. If you read through the balance of it, if you read through the technical details on it, it is quite astounding to see that it's front and center. It's right here. It is here today, and there's no avoiding it. Sorry, I'm just trying to get to my notes here. Just want to open this one more time. If anyone wants to search this out, the international publication number for this patent is WO2020/060-606A1. Now, you guys are already jumping up and down with this number. I'll read the last few digits again. /060606. Okay? I don't make this stuff up. They do. This is amazing. But the title again is Cryptocurrency System Using Body Activity Data. That's it right there. They're not talking about in this cryptocurrency necessarily about a microneedle array, a vaccine tattoo patch. They're speaking more in terms of just connecting technology that is worn by a person to the blockchain. Okay? It says here, body activity data may be generated based on the sensed body activity of the user. A cryptocurrency system coupled to the device of the user may verify whether or not the body activity data satisfies one or more conditions set by the cryptocurrency system and award cryptocurrency to the user whose body activity data is verified. Okay? So if you're dancing on the end of the puppet string and you're doing what you're told, you'll be rewarded. You'll be able to buy and sell in the beast system. Okay? It's just extraordinary. I love it when these kinds of things are just right in our face. We don't have to guess what they're going to do. They just tell us. Okay. If you look at the list of links that I sent to you earlier before the broadcast, we'll kind of go through a few of those. There were quite a few from yesterday that we did not go through, but those are more specific to yesterday's discussion on hydrogels, and I'm not going to go through those. I'm not going to attempt to, but I will go through some of the graphics from yesterday that the technology breakdown prevented us from sharing. So I'll go through those in just a moment. But as far as today, if you'll go to, see if I can get it to open. Go to the links that I sent to you of the articles And it says articles for Thursday, 4/16/2020, Wi-Fi biosensors. That's the title of the link if you're scanning down through the archives. The link that I would like to start with is another patent, and it is at the very bottom of that list of links. You'll find the patent and an excerpt from that patent. And the patent is entitled Microneedle Arrays for Biosensing and Drug Delivery. Again, I won't go too deep into this because you can read through this yourself if you care to, but I'll read the abstract. Methods, structures, and systems are disclosed for biosensing and drug delivery techniques. In one aspect, a device for detecting an analyte and or releasing a biochemical into a biological fluid can include an array of hollowed needles, in which each needle includes a protruded needle structure, including an exterior wall forming a hollow interior, and an opening at a terminal end of the protruded needle structure that exposes the hollow interior, and a probe inside the exterior wall to interact with one or more chemical or biological substances that come in contact with the probe via the opening to produce a probe sensing signal, and an array of wires that are coupled to probes of the array of hollowed needles, respectively, each wire being electrically conductive to transmit the probe sensing signal produced by a respective probe. Simply put, wires within these microneedles that are able to act now as a sensor that will obtain information from the body chemistry, specific to a chemical, to a drug, that those wires are sensing the level of those drugs, the presence of those drugs or substances. We could talk about sugar because this is applied to diabetics, measuring their blood glucose levels. It's even applied for alcoholics, measuring their alcohol level in their bloodstream. And that information from that probe is transmitted, just as I shared in the previous patent with you, okay? Again, I'm just emphasizing that none of this has to be viewed as science fiction. This is all well-proven technology that is going to be applied today for the mark of the beast. Let's go ahead and start at the very top of those links, and I'm opening that one right now, the very top link in that message I sent to you. And this is from Tyndall, Tyndall, Tyndall National Institute. Microtransdermal interface platforms, or microtips. TIPS is an abbreviation for transdermal interface platforms. Microneedle-based transonic technology of the future. Before I read that, I'm going to change our graphics. I want to go through a few of these for you so you're not just looking at me. Put up a graphic on this MTIP, Microtransdermal Interface Platform. Now on the image here, this is a very large patch that is applied to the shoulder area, to the bicep, tricep area, the upper arm, okay? But these certainly are much smaller. This is just one example. All of which you see in the upper graphic can and has been combined into the smaller microneedle array patches that we're talking about, that are about the size of, let's say, your thumbnail, that size of a patch. And we've covered this in previous live streams. But look at the components here of this patch from Tyndall. You have an interface, which is an application on a cell phone. You have a battery. You have a system monitor. You have a drug delivery through the needles. You see the needles down below. A diagnostics software system built into the patch. Control electronics. And lastly, the Wi-Fi communication system. All built into a patch that's applied to the skin. All of this is what is coming by way of this Bill Gates of hell mandated vaccine to be delivered, as he has said, by microneedle arrays. Okay? I don't have to make it up. What he's not saying is that it's the mark of the beast. So again, this is a system that can be interrogated through Wi-Fi. It's already existing, already in place. Wearable technologies have come a long way since Steve Mann first donned a clunky headset in the early 1980s. Today, driven largely by smartwatches and fitness trackers, consumer-oriented wearable devices are expected to ship 215 million units annually by 2019. But although these products provide a wealth of motion and location-based data, they lack the interface required to gather clinical information about the physiological status of the body or to make therapeutic interventions when needed. That must be left to implantable devices such as glucose sensors, pacemakers, and implantable drug delivery systems, all of which still require surgical intervention and are still relatively underdeveloped. At Tyndall National Institute, our team is developing wearable smart patches that will address the opportunity lying between non-invasive consumer devices and implantable medical devices. This roadmap envisions intelligent patch-like systems capable of independently diagnosing physiological conditions and autonomously delivering relevant therapeutic doses while simultaneously relaying information to clinical personnel and medical health software platforms. Okay, the balance of this goes into talking about all the things that I've already laid out for you about the structure and how these are created and how they're applied. I'd like to jump over to another link here. Let me see if I've got this diagnostic devices. Let's see where we're at. Okay. If you'll drop down to the link that begins with online library, and at the end of that link it is diagnostic devices for healthcare. Advanced healthcare materials. This is from Wiley Online Library. Wearable, wireless, and I'm always tough with some of these words, tyrosinase bandage, and microneedle sensors toward melanoma screening. Again, you can set aside the melanoma screening where simply this is a paper that is indicative from January of 2018 of the historical development of these microneedle array sensors. And they call this a microneedle sensor. And that's what we're really focusing on, is the biosensor aspect of these microneedle arrays. So going back to 2018, wearable bendable bandage-based sensor and a minimally invasive microneedle biosensor are described toward rapid screening of skin melanoma. These wearable electrochemical sensors are capable of detecting the presence of an enzyme cancer biomarker in the presence of a substrate immobilized on the transducer surface. In the presence of the surface TYR biomarker, the immobilized, they call it a catechol here, is rapidly converted to a benzoquinone that is detected ampermeteorologically. Say that again. amperometrically. These are tough words for me, being a Californian. With a current signal proportional to the TYR level. Now I'm going to skip down because a lot of this is redundant to what we've already talked about before. But what they're talking about is using this as a sensor that's not invasive. It's an electrochemical sensor that can then transmit information to a healthcare worker in this scanning for melanoma application. So they're looking at the electrochemical process in the bloodstream, in the skin, by way of a microneedle array. All right, so they call this a TYR sensing procedure based on a electrochemical sensor with a 3-electrode system integrated to a small, flexible electronic device. Okay? I think we're pretty well making our case here tonight. I know this is a little plodding and it's a little methodical and it's kind of tedious, but I really am trying to illustrate, especially to new patrons and to listeners on YouTube, that when we come to a conclusion, it's based upon research. It's not purely just conjecture. Okay? Let me take a look at this one. Okay, this was the alcohol monitoring microneedle. We've mentioned that before. I'm just going to jump through a couple of these links. Okay, if you'll go to the link that is sciencedirect.com, sciencedirect.com, the title is Recent Advances of Microneedles for Biomedical Applications, Drug Delivery and Beyond. This is fairly recent. This was published in 2019. The microneedle array, a highly efficient and versatile device, has attracted extensive scientific and industrial interest in the past decades due to the prominent properties including painless penetration, low cost, excellent therapeutic efficacy, and relative safety. Okay, we're going to scan down through some of this, again, because we've covered it before. I want to put up another graphic for you. Take a look at this example, this cross-section of the human skin. It'll give you the idea of the depth of penetration of these microneedle arrays. At the top, we have a layer of skin that are essentially dead cell skins, known as the stratum corneum. Below that is the living tissue of the epidermis, and below that is the dermal layer, or dermis, which contains the sweat gland and nerves, and also the capillaries and the small arteries, small veins, so the capillary system, and then the subcutaneous layer. So these microneedles don't even reach the subcutaneous layer. They're pretty much just your first 3 layers, which is the stratum corneum, the epidermis, and down into the dermal or dermis layer. So this is why it's relatively pain-free, because you're not reaching down deeper into the tissues where the nerves, that are illustrated in white here, where the nerve endings begin. They are within the layers below the dermal layer, or below the epidermis. They start in the dermis or dermal layer. The needles don't even reach that layer, so this is why it's relatively pain-free. You may find a few nerve endings that reach up that far, but for the most part, it's pain-free. Okay, so I'll leave that up. You can see the example of the hypodermic needle, which does reach all the way to the subcutaneous and even to the intramuscular level for IM injections. So this is much more palatable, let's say. Okay. The first microneedle was firstly presented in 1976. Again, I'm giving you a historical context for what we're talking about today. And an American patent was released synchronously concerning the microneedle for transdermal delivery. Let's jump down through here a little. In addition to the small molecule drugs, microneedles can also be used to deliver a large amount of macromolecules in a controllable manner, such as insulin, growth hormones, and vaccines. Okay? So that's where this is all heading. Again, I'm just taking excerpts from these because most of them provide that background that we've covered extensively. I'm just extracting from here these historical contexts, but also delivering to you the specific language that cites vaccines being delivered through microneedle arrays. Now, the last one I'm going to share with you is from science.gov. This is called Sample Records for Digital Microneedle Devices. This is dated 2014. Again, historical context for you. Their introduction. Defense Threat Reduction Agency Research and Development. Counter Weapons of Mass Destruction Technologies. Test Support Division. Out of Kirkland Air Force Base. Device Prototype Final Report. Hydrodynamic gene delivery in human skin using a hollow microneedle device. So we're moving beyond therapeutics, we're moving beyond a vaccine, and now we're getting to DNA. And this goes back to 2013 in my first presentation, in which I talked about the mark of the beast, injecting DNA, producing a third strand of DNA. And this is coming right out of science.gov. Microneedle devices have been proposed as a minimally invasive delivery system for the intradermal administration of nucleic acids, both plasmid DNA, to treat localized disease and provide vaccination. Different microneedle types and application methods have been investigated in the laboratory, but limited and irreproducible levels of gene expression have proven to be significant challenges to preclinical and clinical progression. This study is the first to explore the potential of a hollow microneedle device for the delivery and subsequent expression of plasmid DNA in human skin. The regulatory approved Micron Jet 600A device was used to deliver reporter plasmids and into viable excised human skin. So they took a sample, they excised, they cut out living skin tissue for this test. Exogenous gene expression was subsequently detected at multiple locations that were distant from the injection site, but within the confines of the bleb created by the intradermal bolus. The observed levels of gene expression in the tissue are at least comparable to that achieved by the most invasive microneedle application methods. For example, lateral application of a microneedle. Gene expression was predominantly located in the epidermis, although also evident in the papillary dermis. Optical coherence tomography permitted real-time visualization of the subsurface skin architecture, and unlike a conventional intradermal injection, Micron Jet administration bolus appears to create multiple superficial micro disruptions in the papillary dermis and epidermis. These were co-localized with expression of the reporter plasmid. We have therefore shown for the first time that a hollow microneedle device can facilitate efficient and reproducible gene expression of exogenous naked plasmid DNA in human skin using volumes that are considered to be standard for intradermal administration and postulate a hydrodynamic effect as the mechanism of gene delivery. And that was first released in 2017. Now, I know that's a mouthful, and I can barely express this myself, but in their own language, what they are telling us is that through microneedle arrays, they can inject genetic DNA material into the human skin. A combination of DNA as a vaccine and the quantum dots as the vaccine record, arranged in a pattern that is specific to an individual, functioning as a biosensor that can be interrogated, receiving a Wi-Fi signal and then transmitting data, electrochemical data, back through the Wi-Fi to the cloud, to the blockchain, ties an individual to the blockchain system, while at the same time having introduced a gene expression that can modify the human DNA and produce a third strand of DNA if they so design that to be the function of that gene expression. Okay? If you do just a cursory, and I've published this in multiple issues of Entangled magazine since June of 2017, there are multiples of scientific peer-reviewed papers concerning the third strand of DNA. It's not conjecture on my part, okay? They have the ability now to deliver DNA in the form of a genetically modified COVID-19 virus. So let's backtrack just a little bit, just to pull that together. I'm going to put another graphic up here for you. You've seen this 100 times. Just need to get the software to respond here. We're getting there. There we go. So this is the genome sequence for COVID-19, the RNA sequence with the 4 HIV inserts labeled as these 4 square blocks on the screen. This is a genetically modified vaccine. They have the delivery mechanism to take a genetically modified virus and inject it into our bodies. We don't know what all will comprise, what the components in totality will be of this vaccine. We don't know really what the genetic after effects will be. But I strongly suspect that it will produce this third strand that I've been talking about and comes from the literature for 7 years now. So why a third strand of DNA? Because we are the holy temple. We are the temple of the Holy Spirit. Genesis shows us that we are created in His image, in God's image. Therefore, our DNA is the DNA of our Creator. And we all know of the Holy Trinity. The Holy Spirit, Jesus Christ, the Son of God, and God Himself, the Holy Trinity. We've said for years now, Satan's method is to counterfeit God's creation, to do a 180 on God's creation. And we then do another 180, a subsequent 180, to bring it a full 360 degrees back to the point of creation. Satan is creating, through the third strand of DNA, a temple for the Antichrist spirit that will pervade all of humanity by way of the mark of the beast. The third strand represents his unholy trinity, his counterfeit of God's holy trinity. That's why a third strand has to be produced, because he is changing God's creation, which is intended as the temple of the Holy Spirit, to the temple of the counterfeit of the Holy Spirit, which is the Antichrist spirit. In effect, he's creating his version of a temple by way of the third strand of DNA. And this is why there's been so much focus upon mapping the human genome, CRISPR technology, bio 3D printing, using particle colliders like CERN and other synchrotron particle colliders all around the world, because from the particle collisions are derived the knowledge and understanding of the fundamental particles that make up the atom. And the result of those synchrotrons are multi-fold, multi-layered. So let me talk about that for just a little bit as an offshoot, to kind of step off from microneedle arrays for a little bit. When you look at CERN, and you know that I've talked about CERN for many, many years, and it's really where I sort of came into the public view was my discussions on CERN and the Large Hadron Collider. That's known as a ring-based collider, as opposed to a linear accelerator and collider. A synchrotron is a ring-based particle accelerator, and because it's ring-based, it is a collider, either using straight beam lines that come out, radiate out from the ring, or in the case of CERN, actually taking two opposing streams of accelerated particles and crossing them over within a detector, resulting in a collision, either at 45 degrees or head-on. The result is that you have the release of fundamental particles from these subatomic fundamental particles, protons and heavy ions of lead. Okay? What this has to do with DNA is this. What they're able to do in looking at fundamental particles is to understand the building blocks of the nucleic acids that comprise DNA. Okay? The smaller particles, the starting point of how you begin to arrange atoms from fundamental particles into nucleic acids. And you've heard me talk an awful lot about in silico DNA, the modeling of DNA in a computer. Well, that starts at a much deeper level than simply the DNA itself. It goes to the fundamental particles themselves being arranged, being modeled in silico in the software. And then designer nucleic acids, then the arrangement of those nucleic acids, those nucleotides, those building blocks into DNA itself, and then further out, we're moving out to the macro scale, the arrangement of those DNA building blocks into strings, into the genome sequences, in which they're designing biological life forms, not from scratch. They're not able to create life. They have to take this and apply it. They have to insert it into cells that are already living. And I've said this last night and many times before. Typically they use Ebola for this. Okay? So going back to the particle colliders, not only are they able to identify fundamental particles, but there's something that's kind of an after effect of a synchrotron. and that's what's known as synchrotron energies. Those are predominantly gamma rays and what are known as hard X-rays. This is a very high luminosity X-ray, high-powered X-ray. Not something you'd find in a hospital, okay? But in a research laboratory equipped with a synchrotron. So this is moving away from the actual collision of particles to a discussion of what energies are produced by particles that are, number one, they're accelerated, and number two, they are held to a curved pathway. In other words, a circular pathway, accelerator. When they're held to that magnetically, using dipole and quadrupole superconducting magnets, held to that curved trajectory, moving out orthogonally at 90-degree angles from that curved pathway are X-rays, hard X-rays, and gamma rays. The gamma rays are what we're most interested in our discussion of DNA, because utilizing these X-rays, they can infer, as it's known, they can infer the actual structural composition of the proteins within DNA. And this is where I've shown you in the past what I call the curly-Q pasta models of DNA. And they're all unique to unique specific proteins. By being able to infer the three-dimensional construct of this pasta-like protein structure, they can develop computer-generated three-dimensional models of the proteins. In that aspect, they're able to see the proteins within DNA. That gives them the ability to alter, chemically, alter the biology, be able to alter those proteins. They can alter the structure, the makeup of the proteins, or combine proteins in unique ways. This is all in the building block process of actually building a genome sequence, a custom one, in silico. Now, output from the computer-generated three-dimensional model, of course, are the 3D printed physical models of these, which just assist them in their ability to examine the proteins three-dimensionally, holding them as models, okay? So this is giving you an example of how DNA can be customized using something as seemingly unrelated as a particle accelerator. Where I first began to appreciate this was at my alma mater, which is UC Berkeley. They have a synchrotron up on the hill. When I was at Berkeley, it was referred to as the RAD lab, the radiation lab. The RAD lab up on the hill, we called it, on the hill, which is the Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory today. And the offshoot from that was the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, about a 30-minute drive from Berkeley. Okay? Their synchrotron up on the hill in the RAD lab is housed in a building that you will see a picture of on the cover of Covert Catastrophe, my first novel. That's known as the ALS, the Advanced Light Source Building. It used to be a synchrotron, or excuse me, used to be a cyclotron and a bevatron housed on the hill, but they, of course, those became obsolete and were replaced by the synchrotron. And they built this structure that is circular, a dome structure around it, and that's what's on the cover of my book. Most, or I'd say about half of the storyline of Covert Catastrophe takes place at Berkeley in the Advanced Light Source Building. It's there that I came to appreciate what I just described to you about DNA and hard X-rays and inferring the shape of proteins, because it was with this synchrotron that the human genome was first sequenced. and then further development in DNA research. And what I came to discover early on when I was looking at the synchrotron itself was that most of the funding for the synchrotron came from the Department of Energy in the United States, the DOE. And I thought to myself, what in the world does the Department of Energy have to do with biological research? Well, as I began to appreciate more about synchrotrons and what I just described to you, and my background since my military days in the 70s regarding nuclear weapons that were built, or they were designed, I should say, designed at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, which was in my neighborhood where I grew up, I understood about what was going on in Geneva with CERN, and then I combined that background knowledge with what I discovered at Berkeley that I really was not aware of until I went looking for it and discovered that they had a synchrotron at Berkeley. It had been built since I had left school there in the 70s. And it was quite interesting to me to see that rabbit hole open up, because I understood about synchrotrons, I understood about particle colliders and hard X-rays and all of that. But when I discovered that they were involved in biological research, that really stunned me. And that has led me to where I'm now presenting this information to you about the mark of the beast and the third strand of DNA. Now you know how I got there. I've received emails from people who have seen this video from 2013 about vaccines and forced vaccines and problem reaction solution and MERS coronavirus at that time in 2013 in the family of coronaviruses. And people have written to me and said, how did you know about this in 2013? How did you get there with your conclusions, especially with the third strand of DNA? Well, now you know the story. Now you know the rest of the story. And I've chosen to share that in both of my novels, Covert Catastrophe from 2013 and 2048 Diamonds in the Rough in 2014. And it's amazing how many of those things that I was discussing in those novels now applies right now in the present time. From quantum computing, quantum dots, nano diamonds, especially in 2048 Diamonds in the Rough, nano diamonds figure heavily in there. And then of course my quantum computer constructed in a shape of a spherical 600 cell tetrahedral arrangement, my model of the universe, if I can be that bold, I guess. But again, many of you have heard this before, and I'm sharing this because there are many new patrons and many new listeners on YouTube, to kind of have an understanding of who is this guy that's talking to you about all of these different topics in technology. How did I get here to be talking in this manner with people? It never was intended on my part. And this is kind of my testimony, if you will, as a Christian. It's when I gave up the reins, let loose the reins of my life, and basically it really came down to just saying, truly in anguish, in profound humbleness, giving up the reins to God and saying, do with me as you choose to do. You created me, and I give up. I give up any sense of control and direction in my life. Now you know the rest of the story. That's how I got here. It's never been my picture in my life or my intent to be this public, to share my testimony, to present scriptures, to somewhat interpret scriptures and to use them as teaching tools, teaching moments. and never imagined that my hobby level, my hobby interest in science, all of my life, and the vast array of scientific topics that I like to read up on, not just a narrow field, but a broad field appreciation for science in general, would lead me to speak about science publicly. Because I am not a PhD. I'm not a scientist in the classically trained university academic sense of a scientist. I'm a layperson, and as you guys know, I'm a retired paramedic. I spent 27 years in Oakland working as a paramedic, and in my last few years teaching. But I find myself here as not only a researcher and reporter, but as a translator. I've often referred to myself as a translator of the arcane scientific research, the language, the patents, the peer-reviewed papers, the journals, sharing it with you both through Untitled magazine, sharing those articles and patents, but also in these live streams of making it applicable to our everyday walk of life. Why should we get this deep into science? Why should we get so deep into DNA and deep into vaccines and deep into quantum computers and particle accelerators? Why is that even relevant? Well, it's relevant because we see now the consequences of science. Certainly there have been a lot of benevolent things that have come out of science, and I'm not taking away from that. I applied science in the back of an ambulance, saving people's lives. So I'm not discounting that, but it is that malevolent application, that weaponization of science that I've been presenting to you. Because we find ourselves in quarantine, facing the economic impact of the malevolent application of all of the science that I've presented to you, from particle accelerators to DNA research, to the vaccines, to the microneedle arrays, to talking about geomancy and the foundation of all of computing today, to the binary systems, to talking about the economics and how economic systems operate, and showing you the debt-based system and what that means in the present, today. It's relevant because we find ourselves in quarantine. And now you understand how we got here. You've read it in the pages of Untitled magazine. You've seen this broad spectrum of science that I've revealed to you, along with the economics that is so tied into the scientific research. And I've shared with you those spokespersons in the scientific world who come out and make their prognostications, who make their prophetic statements as false prophets in the weaponization of technology. If we were for a moment to think about quantum computing and how that could, in a benevolent fashion, in a benevolent application, that technology alone, in a very positive way, could very much transform life as we know it. You understand enough about the quantum computers, how they were developed and how they operate, to appreciate what I just said. Not only the speed, but the combinatorial optimization of taking all known probable solutions and examining all those solutions simultaneously. Something that a linear transistor-based computer cannot do because it's linear logic. Quantum computers look at all information simultaneously. This alone, we're not even talking about processing speed. We're talking about how it operates, combinatorial optimization, which comes right out of geomancy. has the ability, if applied in a benevolent fashion, to transform our life. But it won't be, because man built that system by obtaining forbidden knowledge. And quantum computing is in that category, along with the whole host of other technologies, like Wi-Fi, is forbidden knowledge. We see that the applications of Wi-Fi biologically are destroying the human race. Right now, we are dying. It's often been said that from the moment you're born, you are dying, and that's true. But apply that to the discussion of Wi-Fi and its impact biologically on humans, animals, plants, all life forms, and also to the oxygen in our atmosphere, as we've covered. This is forbidden knowledge, forbidden because God wanted to protect us, just like we would protect our own children. Quantum computing likewise is forbidden knowledge because it is born out of the dark arts of geomancy, being one of the mantic arts. Why is it forbidden? Because quantum computing, by their own statements of the developers of quantum computing, access parallel dimensions, which we understand to be demonic realms, that they're communicating just as geomantic and mantic arts were applied for communicating with fallen angels, specifically the governors. And I know this is repetitive, but I'm kind of helping out the new people to catch up. Quantum computers, literally by their own statements, are communicating with other dimensions, communicating with demonic entities who are providing them malevolent, forbidden information. And the results of that information we are seeing right now. Genetic modification, DNA modification, is one of the applications of quantum computing. The advancements that are going on now in science, if we throw the big umbrella over it, all of the scientific disciplines today take their cues, take their advancements from quantum mechanics, of which quantum computing obviously is based upon. Quantum mechanics is the umbrella over all scientific disciplines, and within quantum mechanics is particle physics and particle mechanics, like the accelerators and the fundamental particles derived from those collisions. Okay? Quantum mechanics, its origin is straight out of the Kabbalah. These are scientific disciplines that, unfortunately, because man is in a fallen state, have been used in a weaponized fashion, when they could have been used in a benevolent fashion to help humanity. But humans are flawed, and humans are seeking information through greed, through ego, through seeking of power and control, are seeking information from the dark side. The Kabbalists are the ones that develop quantum mechanics. And you've heard me repeat this many times, that today's quantum physicists and particle physicists, when they are presented the writings and the teachings of the Kabbalists, they recognize immediately the description of their own quantum mechanics in the Kabbalist writings. Well, how did that come about? It's because through the centuries, The Kabbalists have been the alchemists. They have been the geomancers and the other mantic art practitioners. But really, in around 1840, the Kabbalists really stepped forth into academia and infiltrated academia. And they indoctrinated academics with their viewpoint, their quantum mechanical viewpoint of how to describe and how to model the operations of the heavens, of the cosmos, of the universe. Their paradigm, their Kabbalist paradigm, is what was infiltrated into academia in the 1800s. And progressively, academics were indoctrinated, unknowing that this was Kabbalist in origin, indoctrinated into this paradigm of the universe and how it operates, and its components, and its laws, by the Kabbalist influencers that infiltrated and then indoctrinated, and through generations of academics, it's become entrenched because they manipulated academia. And this is how we arrive today with quantum mechanics, which is a Kabbalist system manipulating matter at the fundamental level. And at that fundamental level, all scientific disciplines are influenced. You now find nanotechnology, to be more specific about fundamental particles. We're moving up from things like quarks and muons and gluons and leptons, which are true fundamental particles, of which there are about 1,000 that are known, that have been identified. We're moving up from that level to the nano level, a billionth of a meter level. And this is why we've spent so much time talking about things like nanodiamonds and nanoparticles and nanosystems and nanobots. Because everything in chemistry, biology, materials science, metallurgy, optics, all the way up through computing itself to quantum computing, all has to do with fundamental particles, and they're building out into nanoscale applications, whether they're chemicals or biological cells, metals, crystals. It is at the nanoscale that all scientific disciplines are operating at now. And the focal point of all of those disciplines is upon you and me. This is why this is all relevant to you and I. Because all of the disciplines are focused upon the human body. I've talked in the past about the terraforming of the planet. Well, there is a terraforming of this holy temple, designed as a holy temple. It is an attack by Satan upon the temple that God created. And this is being done at the nanoscale. And this brings us all the way back to the microneedle arrays with quantum dots, which are in the nanoscale. And there are billions of them that are delivered through the microneedle arrays. And then they are arranged in a specific pattern for each individual. That becomes your, as Bill Gates calls it, Bill Gates of hell, your unique identifier. Okay? So CERN and its circular particle accelerator collider has come full circle for me and for you as my friends. We began with CERN and we're coming back to CERN here tonight. Even though the machine is not operational, scheduled to reopen as the high luminosity LHC in 2026. I personally don't think it will happen. but they're building it out. They're upgrading it. But what started for me publicly was CERN, and now we're coming back to it when we talk about the mark of the beast. I find it remarkable that the path that the Lord set me on, and I'm not trying to build myself up by saying any of this, I'm just sharing my testimony. I find it remarkable because I never imagined I would be doing what I've been doing with you for the last 7 years. I had no designs for this. I'm just doing what he tells me to do, one day at a time. So we have about 20 minutes. We can go longer, but we have about 20 minutes. I know that there are questions, and I would like to address those questions if I'm able to. So let's go ahead and set aside some time for that. And Kathleen, I don't know if you want to come in here for those questions or not. I don't see her. Not sure what she's doing. Let me look in the chat room. My moderator has disappeared on me. Loyalty asks, is chat being reset? Is that a question regarding whether or not the chat will show up on YouTube when I make this public? Chat will not be visible when I make this public, okay? It's only during the live stream. Okay. Yeah, they don't show up in YouTube, Loyalty. It's just the way YouTube is. I don't have any control over the chat room. Okay, Perry is asking, how will they add data to the neon diamonds once implanted? Very good question. So first of all, they're not neon. I can understand that. They're fluorescent, and that's probably what you're really saying is fluorescing nanodiamonds. How will they add data? Well, first of all, as I said, the pattern, the arrangement of the quantum dots is itself an identifier. So that's information. It's a unique pattern. And we call it a tattoo because that's how it's described, as a quantum dot tattoo. Not visible unless you take a near-infrared device and scan those quantum dots, and then that application on the phone with an attachment on the phone that produces that near-infrared non-visible light, that application will then read the pattern that those thousands of quantum dots are arranged in. So that's one piece of information, the identifier, identifying pattern. Quantum dots themselves, when they are comprised of carbon in the form of nanodiamond crystals, have what are known as nitrogen vacancy voids. So this is a hollow within the quantum dot, the nanodiamond itself. These are not natural diamonds. These are man-made diamonds, and when they are created to specifically have this chamber, this void within the diamond. Utilizing either a microwave or a pulsed laser, and let's focus on the pulsed laser. Zeros and ones can be delivered into that nitrogen vacancy within a single diamond. It does this by changing the spin of that nitrogen and its electrons, the electrons of the nitrogen. And electrons have an inherent angular momentum, a direction of spin, either spinning up or down. They also spin horizontally, but we focus on, because this is reflected in the operation of quantum computers within the qubits, within the qubit processor of a quantum computer, you are altering the spin of electrons, either from an upspin to a downspin, or a downspin to an upspin. Humans have assigned to that spin the label of 0 or the label of 1. So let's, just for the sake of discussion, say that we have an electron with an upspin. That's its angular momentum, upspin. And we say that that's a 1. And another electron with a downspin, we label that as a 0. So you now have a physical object with a label. A physical object that represents data, that represents information. So if we focus on an electron with upspin, and we call that a 1, if with a pulsed laser we change the direction, or magnetically using a microwave signal, okay, we change the direction that that electron is spinning. We change its angular momentum from up, which is 1 in this discussion, to a downspin. It's now a 0. This is what a quantum computer does. You are able to then transmit that information from one diamond to another, or it can be received by a microwave or a laser system. What it's receiving is, it is detecting, either the microwave Wi-Fi or the laser is detecting the change in spin from 1 to 0. Or if it changed it from its inherent angular momentum of 0 to a 1. That's how it reads information. It is detecting the spin, the direction of spin within that void. And as long as that nanodiamond with that nitrogen vacancy containing that information, whether it's a 1 or a 0, as long as that diamond's intact, that information is intact until it is interrogated by a pulsed laser that's at a specific frequency or wavelength, or by Wi-Fi, by a microwave system or a millimeter wave system. Now thirdly, okay, so that was number 2, it's the spin. Number 1 was the pattern of the quantum dots themselves, composed of nanodiamonds. They can also be made of copper or other things. So we have 2 out of 3. The third one now is the fluorescence. That is the color that results from the oscillation of the crystal nanodiamond, that when it oscillates, it radiates, it produces, if you will, it radiates at a specific frequency and wavelength. And we know when we examine the electromagnetic spectrum, which is very narrow in terms of the visible portion of the electromagnetic spectrum, but we move out into ultraviolet, we move out into infrared, into the non-visibly detectable with the human eye wavelengths of electromagnetic energy. When interrogated by Wi-Fi or by laser, it is able to, or with a near-infrared light, able to detect that oscillation of that crystal nano diamond quantum dot that is unique to that one specific nanodiamond. And each individual nanodiamond will have a slightly different fluorescing wavelength of color. That is the signal that is received and carried back, is that color that is identified. And that is also part of the information that is received from that biosensor that is fluorescing. So you have oscillation, you have a nitrogen vacancy void with zeros and ones in it, And you have the pattern of the distribution of the quantum dots, which is a unique identifier in and of itself. And that's really what the near-infrared scanner is looking for, is the pattern, the arrangement of the quantum dots themselves. Then we go deeper into laser or millimeter or microwave nitrogen vacancy discussion, zeros and ones, and then we look also at the fluorescing color specific to each individual quantum dot. Those three primary characteristics, all contained in the microneedle array vaccine tattoo mark of the beast, all connected by Wi-Fi. Okay? Alrighty, so let me get back into here. Okay. So, Perry, I hope that that answers your question. How does the worship of the image relate to all of this? Mr. Wilson is asking, how does the worship of the image relate to all of this? Well, the worship comes about when people are connected to the beast system through the mark of the beast. And then they are recognizing their God because of this hive mentality tied into the beast. They only acknowledge the existence of the beast, and therefore we describe it as worshiping the beast. They're no longer cognizant of God. They no longer recognize the existence of God, Jesus Christ, and the Holy Spirit. Because when the DNA is changed, they are no longer found in the book of life. God does not recognize those that take the mark of the beast and thus have their DNA changed as his creation. They're not found in the book of life. That's what that means. That means the DNA has been changed. They're no longer God's original design and original construct. Therefore, in their hive-minded mentality, where they've lost all sense of awareness that they've even undergone this change, they are only aware of, only conscious of the beast, and therefore worship only the beast. Okay? Alrighty. All right, let's see what we have here. Mr. Wilson, will the body activity vectors be the nanodiamond vectors? They are sensed in the patent, that are sensed in the patent. Will the body activity vectors be the nanodiamond vectors? Well, the vectors are carriers in one definition of the word of vector. When we are talking about geometry, a vector is a direction and a line as a vector. If we are talking about the transmission of diseases, vectors can be animals like pigs and rats and horses and bats, okay? So I'm not sure, but I think what you're saying here is that will the human body be that vector, be the carrier of these quantum dots? Yes. And it will be the carrier of the modified DNA that is undergone the gene expression. Okay? I think that's what you were asking. Will the body activity vectors be the nanodiamond vectors? They are sensed in the patent. I think I answered your question, Mr. Wilson. Just maybe clarify in the chat room for me if I didn't. Okay. Loyalty is saying, do you think through the bioprinting and the accumulation of technologies and implantation of tech like the Neuralink, the Antichrist could be manifest in a combination of all tech? Well, okay, very good question, or I should say Loyalty. Very good question. If you go back, and I don't remember the month, in Entangled magazine, and I'll paraphrase what I published in the magazine about this, I was putting forth the scenario that the image of the beast would be a hologram, and that it would be a solid hologram. Holograms today are touch sensitive. They're called haptic, H-A-P-T-I-C, haptic holograms, where they are solid enough that you can feel them when you push against the hologram, and the hologram in turn responds to your pressure, your pushing, and you can move the holograms around as if they're a solid object. Well, what I presented in Entangled magazine, and I think in at least 2 live streams, was the fact that given enough granularity of data, granularity being the density of the data, given enough data that is input into a laser system, and the laser simply, the photons are carriers of digital information. And we see that with fiber optic technology. Those are laser carrier light beams, photons, channeled through glass fiber optics. Same thing with a laser outside of a fiber optic, carries digital information. Well, if you can increase the density of that data, the granularity of the data, to such an extent on a laser holographic system, because lasers using mirrors produce holograms, with enough data you could not only produce a haptic, responsive to human touch hologram, but one that is actually solid, 3-dimensionally solid. Okay? And within the temple, whether that's going to be the human body genetically modified or an actual structure as a temple, hard to say. But I think the image of the beast will be produced by a quantum computer system, providing that density, that quantity of data that will result in a 3D solid hologram that will then perform the signs and wonders, facilitated, augmented by quantum computing. Okay? Okay, and bioprinting. Okay, you mentioned bioprinting as well. I included the bioprinting in that discussion of the density of data and the 3D image of the beast, the solid 3D, that utilizing those building blocks, those amino acids, genetic expression, that you could literally, with 3D bioprinting, which has been producing organs already, you could produce, using a combination of holograms and 3D bioprinting, produce this solid image. Okay? All right. Yeah, and if I'm not answering completely enough or specifically enough for any of you, Loyalty or Mr. Wilson, go ahead and email me at anthonypatchauthor@gmail.com. That's AUTHOR, Anthony Patch Author. Or click on the contact tab at anthonypatch.com, and that will send me an email, of course, and I'll respond to that. Okay? All right. I'm sort of self-moderating here in the chat room. How can a vaccine tattoo, Jonathan is asking, how can a vaccine tattoo be the mark when you could get it anywhere on your body and not your right hand or forehead? I mean, they are saying this will come in the mail and you can do it yourself. Yeah, very good question. And I think I addressed that in a few live streams ago. Imagine this situation. You're going into a restaurant. You're going into a grocery store. You're going into a sports arena. And they either have security people with handheld infrared, near-infrared scanners, or they have near-infrared scanners around the doorway, just like you would find as you go through the scanners at the airport, okay? That you would be scanned. Well, that microneedle array vaccine tattoo would need to be on your body and uncovered. Most of the time the forehead is uncovered, unless you pull your ball cap down or your other hat down, or you're wearing a burqa, okay? And most of the time your hands are exposed, unless you're wearing gloves, okay? So even wearing a mask, the N95, your forehead would be exposed. If you're not wearing, latex gloves or plastic gloves or latex gloves or even gloves to keep your hands warm, most of the time the back of your hand would be exposed. And I think that's the most practical instructions that will be offered. I don't think in the near term they're going to say, put it on your forehead, because most people won't do that. They'll just put it on the back of their hand. But I think the instructions that will be included when these are mailed out, as you indicated, and I believe, and I've stated that they will be mailed out, because these are basically a peel and stick application. And on that point about the mail, I'll reinforce what I've said a few times. The problem with most vaccines, in fact all vaccines, when they're in an ampule, when they are in a glass container, they must be refrigerated from the point of manufacture to the point of administration. And in that cold chain, as it's described, that cold chain of a temperature range has to be maintained. And if it's violated, if the chain is broken, then the vaccine is no longer viable. Well, the micropatch does away with that. The microneedle array does away with that need for refrigeration. Hence the ability to mail the patches with a set of instructions, which I think will include, you need to put it on your exposed skin. And again, most people will just put it on the back of their hand. Now, the patch goes on and then it's peeled off. And it doesn't leave anything visible on the skin. Okay? Alrighty. Okay, I'm trying to see in the chat. It's such a small box in here. I'm trying to scan down without missing you guys. All right. Well, I think we're at the end of our questions, which is fine, and it's 9 o'clock. It's now 2 hours. Okay, good. I'm glad I was able to answer that for you, Loyalty. In terms of Satan believing he will overthrow God, through watching CERN's presentation, they seem... Let me scroll this. Come on. There it is. It popped up. Right. Again, what you're referring to are many of my past presentations, Loyalty, regarding CERN, that yes, Satan in his hubris actually believes through the building of his weapons system, and that's what CERN is all about. Developing weapons systems, kinetic energy weapons. And you'll recall that I've spent a couple of years talking about the linear accelerator that CERN has been prototyping, known as the Awake linear accelerator, which is able to accelerate particles in its prototype phase 1,000-fold faster. The particles undergo acceleration 1,000 fold above what the synchrotron is able to accelerate particles to. And it does that over a distance of only 10 meters. Okay? The main ring is 17 miles in circumference, 27 kilometers. So the wave, what we're talking about with a wake, is using a waveform to accelerate particles in a very short distance, but 1,000-fold faster acceleration, greater acceleration within that 10-meter distance. Okay? This is a weapon system, kinetic energy weapon system. And there's a host of other spin-offs from the research at CERN developing weapons systems. So it is in Satan's hubris that he thinks that through the development of his weapons systems, in particular using particle accelerators, he can kill God's angels, the other 2/3, and kill God himself. And this is all the spirit that was behind the building of the Tower of Babel, which was to reach to heaven, to sit on the throne in heaven, to dethrone God himself. Okay? Is Kathleen's mom going with you guys to New Hampshire? No. And Michael, we can talk about that privately in email if you like. Okay? Jonathan is saying they showed the tattoo vaccine on One America News the other night, talking to a manufacturer who had for display on the end of his finger. And they had a government contract, I believe. Yeah. So remember, we shared with you the leading developer of this microneedle array for the delivery, specifically developing for the delivery of vaccines, is the Micron company. Okay? And we shared that in the April 1st edition of Entangled magazine. We showed you the company, we showed you the development sequence, and I think we even shared the patent. Okay? So that's probably who they had on America One. I know that there are a number of people, because you guys are emailing me, a number of people on YouTube that are picking up this information and bringing it out on their channels, and that's great. It needs to be done. Their discovery was of a God particle. Do you believe they feel this is another door? Loyalty is saying a God particle. I'm not sure exactly the presentation you're talking about, but if this is in the discussion of the Higgs boson, which has been labeled by the media as the God particle, that was back in 2012. And we've discussed and published about that at length. If there's a new God particle label being assigned to a new discovery of a new fundamental particle, I'm not aware that they're calling something new also the God particle. So just email me that information. I know that there are discussions about some of the muons within the boson family of particles, and also some recent information about neutrinos related to dark matter. Okay, trying to detect dark matter through the detection and study of neutrinos. So I'm pretty much up to speed on those things as well if you want to email me. Okay? Okay. Through their discovery of the Higgs boson, yeah. Kind of old news now, back in 2012. But, you know, they recycle these stories and they bring it up because many people, you know, since 2012 may never have heard about the God particle. Okay? I will just kind of say briefly about the God particle. Only to a 90 percentile have scientists agreed that there was actually a confirmation of the discovery of the Higgs boson. Okay? Only to a 90 percentile. And there are many scientists outside of CERN that are saying that the data is not conclusive that the Higgs boson was even discovered. It's an energy signature. Okay? The other thing is that they claim that the Higgs boson gives rise to all other matter, that the family of bosons, bosonic matter, gives rise to all of the subordinate matter in the universe. Well, something that they do talk about, but on a very limited basis in the peer-reviewed papers, is the fact that there's a material that I have spoken about for years and years, which is the quark gluon condensate, labeled as Strangelets. And you guys that have been with me for years, you've heard me talk about this endlessly, about Strangelets, and I won't do it tonight. But simply to say, in their model of how the universe came to be, obviously their model is the Big Bang. And their timeline of the Big Bang, from the singularity and the explosion of the singularity, they want to say that the next thing that came into being as far as matter is the Higgs boson, hence the media label of God particle. But in the literature, it is also clearly stated that there's something that predated even the Higgs boson in the timeline of the Big Bang, and that those are known as strangelets. These are quarks that are bound by a force that is called a gluon. It's both a force and a particle, but it's predominantly a binding force of quarks. Those being labeled by science as the most powerful explosive substance in the known universe, strangelets, this condensate, gave rise to the Higgs boson when it exploded. So when the strangelets, the quark gluon condensate, exploded, so you have singularity, you have strangelets, and that gave rise to the Higgs boson, which as the broader family of bosons gives rise to all other particles. That's the mainstream dogma in science of the Big Bang. Okay? So, where are strangelets produced if we're talking about CERN? If we're talking about CERN and the Higgs boson, how do we get strangelets? Well, those are produced in one of the four main detectors of the LHC, which is the Alice detector. And when particles are crossed, and more specifically when they are impacting head-on, which are protons and heavy ions of lead, when they collide head-on in the Alice detector, the result is the production of greater than 10 tera electron volts. When CERN shut down for this upgrade, they were achieving 13.5 tera electron volts, TeV, as their consistent power level as a result of collisions. These are energies released, the luminosity, energies released by way of the collision, and those energies, they're called the mass equivalency of the particles is measured in electron volts. So 13.5 tera electron volts. At that level is where they were consistently operating for the last 4 years before the shutdown. The threshold for producing strangelets within the Alice detector by way of these collisions, the threshold energy that is released from these collisions that results in the production of strangelets is 10 tera electron volts. There are not many papers, but there are peer-reviewed published papers on strangelets. And if you go to Brookhaven National Laboratory, their relativistic heavy ion collider, the RHIC, and strangelets, go back to August of, I think it was 2016. But look up Strangelets RHIC Brookhaven National Laboratory, and specifically in August. And it may be 2015, 2016. I think it was 16. They published a paper indicating that in March of that same year, they had achieved 10 tera electron volts and had acknowledged in that paper the production of strangelets. The RHIC acts as a prototype of different experiments that are then conveyed over, transported over to CERN for the LHC to continue on with. The threshold again is 10. They've been operating the LHC at 13.5. They openly acknowledge that they've been producing strangelets. Why is that important? Because you cannot contain strangelets. Naturally, because they're extremely heavy, plummet to the core of the planet. And because they are stable particles, they attract all other matter. Natural matter comprising the Earth is considered unstable matter. Strangelets attract unstable matter to itself. This is called the neutrino effect, the neutrino process. This is how a neutron star, I shouldn't say neutrino, I'm a little tired. This is the neutron star process, where matter collapses, not due to gravity, as mainstream dogma will say, but due to the electromagnetic attraction of matter to strangelets. It pulls the planet, condenses the planet, compresses the planet down into a neutron star, and then eventually spontaneously explodes. Okay? So this is where the whole discussion of the God particle kind of falls apart, because strangelets, the quark gluon condensate, actually gives rise to the boson known as the Higgs boson. So they should be celebrated, but they want to keep it quiet because it is an explosive weapons system, as I said earlier. Strangelets will be applied in an attempt to kill God and his angels. It is the most explosive material in the known universe, according to science. Okay? And it can't be contained. It can only be directed. Michael is asking me to talk about CERN and getting my stream interrupted. Yeah, that happened quite often when I would talk about CERN. And it wasn't so much that I was interrupted. I think what you're talking about is when I made a public presentation and there were two gentlemen from Google, as it turns out, men in black, so to speak, that met me in the parking lot at the conclusion of my presentation and asked me to stop speaking in public. They said, "We like what you're saying, but we would like you to stop." I got the message, and I did stop for 4 months, but then God impressed upon me to be bold and be brave and get out there and keep talking. And that's what I've been doing. Okay? Okay. Loyalty says, what you've explained is what I've been wanting to ask you for at least a year. Sorry, one more question. Okay. In terms of the Kabbalah, their beliefs state the world was created through numbers and letters and words, or gematria, or geometry in Greek translation, I believe. Yes. In short, The Kabbalists gave us the binary system. They gave us the black and white. They gave us the 0 and 1. They gave us the binary system that we operate with today in computers. Okay? And out of that binary explanation of the universe, they have utilized their gematria, their geometry, their sacred geometry to explain their paradigm of the universe and how it operates. But God is not held to a binary system. God is not held to a binary paradigm. God operates in a quaternary system, a system of fours. Satan operates in a binary and a ternary system, a balanced ternary system. And in our very first, I think it was our very first, either the first or second webinar that Kathleen and I presented, and you have access to in the patrons' archives, we went through at length talking about, and we've done other subsequent live streams talking about the balanced ternary system that Satan is confined to. It's basically -1, 0, and +1. Well, God operates beyond Satan's ternary system, and he operates in a quaternary system, a four system. It's not binary. So that's the short explanation. But the Kabbalists have infiltrated, indoctrinated, and manipulated academia since the 1800s, as I said earlier, into believing in the Kabbalists' paradigm, which is the binary system. Okay? And then that rolls out into the gematria and sacred geometry as a whole. Now, I want to say parenthetically, my 600-cell tetrahedron, that sphere comprised of tetrahedrons, is not sacred geometry. Okay? So please don't confuse my model as being a Kabbalist model. Let's go back to the Big Bang. It's not a Big Bang. It's not an explosive expansion of the universe. It is a replication of tetrahedrons. And the Kabbalists don't say this. Tetrahedrons. A tetrahedron is a polytope. It's a four-sided polytope. Triangles, 4 of them. Okay? It's like a pyramid, but it has a triangular base instead of a square base, like an Egyptian pyramid does. The simplest polytope that can enclose a volume, and I'm quoting from R. Buckminster Fuller, is a tetrahedron. And this has been borne out at the microscopic scale, the atomic scale, this arrangement of atoms and molecules spontaneously in nature, so to speak. It's God's design, but spontaneously forming, the elements forming into tetrahedrons. And as more energy is applied to the tetrahedrons, they replicate into more and more complex geometric forms. And the complex form that I have settled upon as my model of the universe is the 600-cell tetrahedron, comprised of tetrahedrons. R. Buckminster Fuller stated that the simplest polytope that can enclose a volume is a single tetrahedron. Now, what I'm about to say, he did not say. I took that and went forward and said, if the universe began with a singularity, it would be a singularity in the shape of a tetrahedron, containing all energy. And then, spontaneously, just like we see with cell mitosis, where cells divide and subdivide and divide and divide, you have cell mitosis as a process of replication of the original. The same thing happens with tetrahedrons. And it's not an explosion. It's a spontaneous replication of tetrahedrons into two. And as we've explained in past live streams, it's a tetrahedron above and a tetrahedron below. Now don't confuse that and think that I'm saying it's as above, so below, which is the Kabbalist. I'm simply saying in the first arrangement of the first two tetrahedrons, you have one above the other because the two bases join. That's the first move of God. It's a diamond. A tetrahedron on top of another tetrahedron is a diamond. My second novel, 2048, Diamonds in the Rough, nanodiamonds. Okay? Satan counterfeits nanodiamonds, the tetrahedron of God's creation. And then those two replicated into four, and so forth and so on, expanding outward concentrically into a sphere. And at the outer edge of that sphere, that outer surface of tetrahedrons, is the outer edge of the ever-expanding universe as it continues to replicate its tetrahedrons outward. And it does it at such a rapid pace that humans interpret that speed of replication outward in all directions as an explosion. It's not an explosion, it's an expansion. Okay? So, I hope that answers the question. Alrighty, let's see what we got here. Well, we still got quite a few people that have hung in with us late tonight. Okay? All right. I think we should go ahead and wrap it up. If you have other questions, I'm happy to try to answer them succinctly in an email to you. Excuse me. I know we've covered a lot of history here. We've gone backwards and kind of refreshed memories and delivered information to, the new patrons to kind of get them up to speed to where we're at here today. I thank you for staying for an hour, 2.5 hours this evening. Lord willing, we'll get back together on Sunday evening. I think my wife has gone to bed. She was pretty tired tonight. So I apologize that we're not concluding with one of her wonderful prayers this evening. But if you do have prayer requests, please email them. We honor them. We do follow through on praying for those of you that care to share, care to honor those needs that you have. And that's what we do as a group here. This is what we're doing. We've all become very close friends through these live streams. And we encourage and we support one another. This is our fellowship. Kathleen and I look forward to these live streams. There is always preparation that we do for these. But beyond just the preparation of the scientific information and the things that we share with you, the reporting we do, it's the fellowship. That's what we really look forward to. So thank you. I apologize that I wasn't able to be with you in chat and that my wife needed to go, to bed because she's been working really hard here around the house. We've had a lot going on with the home. So anyway, I just want to say thank you. God bless you all. And Lord willing, we'll be back together on Sunday evening, 7 o'clock Eastern Time. Good night.